Where did you have this?
I know where else.
Good morning. This is a meeting of the Senate Committee on Agriculture on February 20th, 2024. And we're going to take up a portion of S-197, which is a bill that would ban PFAS substances. And we're going to take a look again at section 6 and 7 of that bill. And we're waiting for our attorney, Michael O'Grady, who's in another committee at the moment, but hopefully will join us quickly. And so as we proceed, let's just introduce ourselves and we'll hear from a couple of witnesses first. So I'm Senator Brian Collmore, acting as vice chair today of Senate Agriculture, and I represent the Rutland District.
Irene Renner, Senator for Chittenden North, which includes Fairfax.
Brian Campion, Bennington County.
And I'm Rich Westman. I'm from Lamoille County.
And we're lacking our chair, Senator Bob, from up north in the NEK, and he's got another appointment today. So I don't know whether John wants to go first, or I think Linda was with us as well. Is she still there, Linda?
Yes.
Okay. So Linda Waite Simpson, who is the Associate Director of the Vermont Veterinary Medical Association, is with us. And our purview in this bill is to figure out what the connection is between seeds and PFAS. So Linda, if you want to start and give us an idea of where we are on this. Have you read the bill, the sections that we're talking about?
I have, yes. And I'm not a chemist, so let me just put that out there right now. I'm not a chemist and I'm not a veterinarian, but I do represent approximately 400 veterinarians here in the state of Vermont. And I know you all received testimony last week or the week before, where somebody had mentioned that veterinarians are not recommending these flea collars. And I don't think there's anything farther from the truth here in Vermont at any rate. My members tell me that they are recommending Seresto collar for flea and tick prevention and treatment. It is a product that does not have to get changed out every month. It goes for about 8 months before it has to be swapped out for a new one. Under the proposed bill, it appears that these products would be banned here because of it contains PFAS. So I am just here asking for your consideration because there may be increases in zoonotic diseases as a result of not having as effective a product out there. I live with a long-haired dog who is a tick magnet, and even with the Seresto collar, I occasionally find ticks on him. So it's a concern that that other products out there may not be as effective. They also, PFAS are also in ear tags that are placed on cattle. So I think that there may be some unintended consequences of banning some of these products. And I would just ask for some careful consideration before we, go down the path of preventing these products from being here at all.
Okay. Anybody have any questions?
No, nice to see you, Linda. It's Brian Campion.
Hi, Brian.
So I'll have one, Linda. Is there any indication that these products do contain PFAS substances?
Yes, they absolutely do. And it's tested. I mean, it's like, all the medical devices, the contact lenses in my eyes right now contain PFAS. I mean, it's just ubiquitous. It is everywhere. And I think that, being good stewards of the environment, we need to be able to live with some amount of this, but not excessively. And clearly, if there are products out there that are effective and can be used in place of these products with PFAS, absolutely go for it. But I think there are some products that just, we just don't have the technology now to put this out there. And so, we are concerned about increase in, tick-related diseases in particular, if these products are not available here.
Yeah, I guess the better question would be, are there products that don't have PFAS, and not just dog collars and ear tags, but so many of what we buy every day probably already does, and, from what you're saying, and I don't know if you've had a chance to testify before, the Health and Welfare Committee in the Senate or not, but from what I'm taking from your testimony, you're probably gonna ask us to exempt the dog collars and the ear tags?
The veterinary products, yes, that don't have readily available alternatives. And for the dog collars, cat collars, there is nothing out there right now that doesn't contain this chemical. It's everywhere.
Anybody else questions for Linda? Yeah, Brian.
So the best thing you would say is to just exempt all veterinarian products, keep it that broad.
I mean, I think it's a simple solution, given the entire thrust of the bill is to ban PFAS. I mean, there's an amendment coming out today to just like prevent them from coming into the state at all, I believe by 2030. And, you know, I agree that we need to press manufacturers to find alternatives. I think that Vermont is such a small market that most of these manufacturers are going to go, market share is not big enough for me to really put the research and whatnot into finding an alternative product. And so then we end up either having to, you know, cross the lake or the river to buy these products, or we live with, you know, an increase in zoonotic diseases.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How do you feel about possibly labeling anything with PFAS so that before I use a dental floss, I know there's PFAS, before I use contact lenses, I know there's PFAS, before I rub flea stuff on the back of my cat's neck? I at least know that I've got PFAS on my hands now and I can act appropriately, whereas right now we have no idea.
I agree. I think labeling and education is probably the first step that ought to be taken, but outright banning these products that do have a place in our, you know, in our environment, you know, I mean, you have to be able to weigh the consequences of, you know, increased ticks and fleas here. I mean, for Pete's sake, there was a case of plague out in Oregon, you know, from a cat that had, you know, eaten a mouse, and then the human caught it. So, I mean, these are real things that are happening out there. So I think that, you know, just being able to have that warning and be able to, you know, make it an informed decision is really important.
Thanks, Mr. So do you know what the PFAS, and we might be just going down a rabbit hole, and feel free to just say you're not equipped to answer this, Linda, what the PFAS does exactly for the product? You know, when you put the collar on or you put the little solution on, what does it do that helps the product? Because we've had these things, you know, PFAS, well, I guess PFAS was around when I was a kid. It probably wasn't in those dog collars. What does it do to help it, you know?
My understanding is that it helps with the water resistance to the products.
I see. Thank you. That makes sense.
Stabilizes the plastic.
Thank you.
So if we were to accept what you're saying and somehow put a fence around veterinary products, I'm just wondering what that actually means. Does that mean food? Does it mean little sweaters that
Garments, yeah.
Yeah. Is that what you're at, or are you specifically asking about the dog collars and the ear tags?
Well, I mean, the dog collars and ear tags do come to mind. I believe there are probably other products, implants that are used just like in humans. You know, the incidence of PFAS in human medical devices is pervasive. And I think you're going to find the same situation with veterinary products. I don't consider a dog sweater a veterinary product. It's an over-the-counter clothing item. But a veterinary product would be a medical product that is designed to prevent or treat disease. And in that respect, I think, you know, your flea and tick collars would fall into that category, but dog boots and sweaters would not.
nor food.
nor food.
Okay.
I mean,
And-
I think, we definitely want to keep it out of the food source. That's for sure. And my understanding is that we had already banned packaging on food items themselves. So that's really not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the other 90% of the universe.
Are you up to speed on where we are in Vermont with regard to other states who are considering this sort of ban?
I have not been able to find that any other state has gone as far as this bill goes. I mean, clearly other states have banned the firefighting foams, and I think I was actually in the House when that bill came through and we wholeheartedly supported it. The main contributors to PFAS pollution are the firefighting foams, the fabrics, the big ticket items, flea and tick collars, compared to some of those bigger items is really inconsequential. But to answer Senator Renner's question, I think labeling is certainly warranted in these situations, for sure.
I guess I wonder now whether if we were to do this, what the next group might be that would come in and say, well, what about us? We should have an exemption too because ... So I appreciate the testimony. I understand what you're saying, but I don't know if we were to do that, I don't know how we would ever prevent other people from wanting exemptions for whatever it is that they sell. So I think we'll certainly take it into consideration, but I don't know where we might go with this, actually.
Okay, I'm actually surprised that you haven't seen more pushback from the human medical field because, it is in everything. I mean, it's just in everything.
Yes. Anyone else? All right. Linda, thank you very much for your testimony. We appreciate it. You're welcome to stay on with us if you like.
Nice to see you.
Okay, thanks.
So let's call on John Vegas now, who is from Seedway. And I understand a close relative to Senator Renner as well.
Practically a
Or the
sister,
honest.
brother.
And you saw us walk around the table, introduce ourselves. So John, welcome in, and what can you help us with today?
So I apologize. I learned about this while I was at the eye doctor this morning. So if I'm squinting, that's that's why. So I don't really have a whole lot of background about the bill, just the general idea. And I was asked to comment about the impact on seed treatments, and I consulted with the American Seed Trade Association, and they have done an informal study of 100 members. And found that, to our knowledge, there are no PFASs in any of the seed treatments currently being used. They are going to be following up with a more formal study, an investigation into that. But at this point, we are not aware of any, and so there shouldn't be any impact on that. There's one seed, what we call a polisher or finisher, that helps the seed flow more easily in a planter, so it doesn't bridge and stick. That I have to look into to determine whether there may be something in that one. I can't say definitively this morning one way or the other.
Okay. Anybody have questions for John? Yes, Senator Renner.
Hi, John. Curious about the neonics, if you want to come back and talk about this another time, or because we're going to talk about those as well. I know New York State is on the way to banning neonics in the seeds. Is that true?
Just repeat that. I'm having a little trouble hearing.
The neonicotinoid seeds
Yes.
have been banned as of a certain future date in New York State, is our understanding.
2029, correct.
Okay. Is there anything you can add about that while we have you?
So, as a farmer and a seed guy, I find that it was a little bit frustrating because I think there is a need for them to protect the seed from various insects and also diseases which are introduced because the insect is a vector. Um, it- so ironically, the testimony before me was about flea collars, and the active ingredient in many flea collars is imidacloprid, which is a neonic, which is the same product used on many of the seed treatments. The challenge is, in a perfect world, no one would want to use them. Farmers would not want to use them, but it's an insurance policy because the cost of establishing a crop in Vermont or New York is significant, and we do not have a growing season long enough that if the crop fails, to come back in, plant it again, go through the additional expense to do over. And it's an insurance policy. And as we move as an industry toward greater use of cover crops, which we should, Vermont is a big dairy state, so there's a high level of use of manure as fertilizer, which is conducive to many of the pests that we're looking to control with the neonics. So I think it's a little bit like a vaccine, that you use it as a preventative measure to ensure that you get a crop established. I'm not sure if I was very clear on that, but if you've got any questions, shoot.
Right?
No, thank you.
So, John, I'm curious, the effective date in New York is 29.
Correct.
2029. I assume that was put into effect in order to give the seed manufacturers a little time to maybe come up with an alternative to a treated seed. Is New York the only state that has enacted this? I know Quebec has done it, and I'm not sure how many years, maybe 4 or 5 years ago.
That's correct. I'm not
Okay.
aware of any other state, and you are correct about in Canada.
Okay,
There are other products, bonides that are diamides, excuse me, that are on the market that are we feel less effective and are much more prone to resistance being developed by the pests, by the insects. So is it yeah, it's some of the details of the bill are not 100% clear as far as exemptions. If there isn't, if a farmer does get an exemption, at least from our purposes, we are not going to offer neonics after, well, realistically, probably 27, because it takes time and to convert the product over to a new seed treatment, because not all the seed gets sold in a particular year. It'll carry over. And so if we start in 26 or 27 making that conversion to be completely out of the neonics by 29, that's what we will need to do.
so some of the speculation that I've heard, and I think other members of the committee has, that if we ban the neonics, the next product could be even worse in terms of their effect. And most of the opposition is coming from the pollinator community, and I understand their concern. So that's one thing to consider, and I realize you can't necessarily speculate on what the next product's effects could be. But the other thing I wonder about is whether the industry as a whole would react strongly enough to one state banning it to completely turn around and begin to offer a non-treated seed. And how likely is it that if Vermont joined New York in this effort, that it would have any effect at all?
From a industry-wide perspective, our market share in the Northeast in general, if you want to call it New York all the way to Maine, is so insignificant that I don't see it having an impact. There's more corn grown in a single county in Iowa than there is in most of the Northeast. So we're not that big an impact. As far as the pollinators are concerned, we've had bees on my farm for years, and so I'm sensitive. I'm a bee lover, but we're using about 1/4 ounce of active ingredient on the seed, and we're placing it 1.5 to 2.5 inches in the ground to control these pests. We have a local fertilizer and retailer near here, and this past year, the only soybeans that they sprayed to control aphids were beans that were not treated with a neonics. And so rather than having a case where you're placing the pesticide 1.5 to 2 inches in the ground at a very low rate, just on the seed, you're having to come back in with a sprayer with 120-foot booms, and you're spraying aerially the entire field, which to my view is much more detrimental potentially to.
But if we were to pass this and it became effective in July of 24, the ban, what would a Vermont farmer be able to do on July 2nd in terms of being able to buy untreated seed?
There would be potential options that'd be very limited. So there's two questions I have. One is, so the seed business is not like a machine shop where we just go out and stamp out widgets. We are planning today for crops that we will producing seed for 25, 26, even 27, depending on what the crop is. If we're developing a new alfalfa variety and we're starting with breeder seed that you can fit in your teacup, we're planning for the production of that crop to increase it over 2 years, establish the fields, harvest it. It's a long process. And so to react to by 24 would be that would be difficult for the industry to react to that and be able to provide alternative solutions to a neonics. Now the other question to that is that is a proposal for strictly untreated or because we typically, depending on what the seed is, we'll also use a fungicide, which is used to protect against other pathogens, Phytophthora, and different plant diseases, not just the insects. Your neonics are protecting against insect pests, not other pathogens.
Okay.
Does
So
that make sense what I'm saying?
No, it does. And I appreciate that, John. I guess another way to ask that question is, what do farmers in Quebec do now? Since it's been banned there for a number of years.
So they're using diamides, which is a different mode of action.
And is that equally harmful to, if you take the argument with the pollinator group?
I don't think so. But again, I'm not sure that, the risk to pollinators is really only, in my understanding, in a certain specific type of instance. And I've been farming no-till or mostly no-till for 30 years, and I have never been in a situation where I felt that there was any potential risk to a pollinator. You have to have something like a dandelion in flower in the field, planting with a planter, an air planter, which could potentially throw the dust from the seed onto the dandelion, which would then be landed on by a bee. And then I've never been in a situation like that. because generally those weeds have been controlled and you're planting into a seed bed where there are no flowers growing. At least that's the goal.
Okay. Yeah, Senator Redd.
Mr. Chair. John, what do organic farmers do? Are they allowed to use seeds with these pesticides on them?
Organic farmers do not. They use, there are a couple of coatings that they will use. Apex Green is one that comes to mind, and some other Omri approved. But typically they do not have fungicides and they do not have neonics on them.
And they have some yield, right? I mean, they're not,
But
it's reduced yield.
they can, yes. It's a higher risk of having a failed crop. And we provide organic seed to organic growers as well. I'm not trying to what's the word I'm looking for? It's a unique production system with its own set of challenges and its own set of benefits. I think there's a lot of what is good about the organic process that is very, very good, and more conventional farmers should be doing it. More and more are doing it. The use of cover crops, use of aggressive use of rotation cropping is very important. One of the challenges that I have with the organic system is the use of tillage, which is required to control weeds and provide a seed bed that's warm and more conducive to an untreated seed being able to grow. Every time you work the soil, you're burning carbon, you're burning organic matter. You're making 3 to 4 to 5 times more trips across the field than you would in a system which I employ, which is no-till with some use of chemicals to control weeds and insects. But when you're using no-till, which is burning the least amount of carbon, protecting the soil from erosion far better than any other system, you have to use seed treatments to protect the seed, and you're going to have to use some things like glyphosate to control the weeds. So there's a balancing act. Like the testimony before me, do you put up with the PFAS, or do you have the risk of rampant amounts of Lyme disease and so forth in pets, and then potentially in humans, or who knows, bubonic plague or whatever? So there's trade-offs.
Senator Campion.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So we're getting a neonics bill, correct, after crossover, and so potentially. I mean, it
I don't
sounds
think
like.
the House committee's voted it out yet.
No, but yeah, so we'll have an opportunity to jump into this more, or would you want us to keep having the conversation? Totally up to you.
No, I think it's good to hear from John, because this
Yeah.
is a brand new witness to me.
Yeah,
So I don't mind talking about it. We have sort of strayed off the PFAS topic, but that's okay.
so to that, and then I guess we have the pollinator issues. We have a bill that's coming over, I think, our way, and there's gonna be a big push, from what I can tell, to do this year. If it passes, and tell me a little bit about the consequences that might come out of it, the negative consequences as you see them. Because it sounds like there is a market out there already for untreated seeds. Can you say a little bit more about what you see as the negative consequences of the bill going forward?
I think, well, one thing will be there will be limited options for non-organic farmers to, in the short term, if you have a 2024 timeframe on it. If it was a phase-in,
Sure,
that would be much easier for the industry to react to providing some alternatives that
Okay.
maybe less objectionable, maybe less effective, but at least less objectionable. So that would be the first thing is to have a time frame, which is the case in New York. To implement something in 24, if it was 25 or 26 or phased in, that would be much more manageable from an industry support perspective.
Yeah, and I think we need pollinators to live, I mean, to farm and to exist. So it is, and we know they're dying off. We've got a serious problem. So I think it's, I'm hoping we get something this year, and maybe the phase-in approach is the way to go. I'm not sure. But maybe we'll also have you back for a deeper conversation if we get the bill.
Sure.
Thanks.
Senator Renner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. John, do I understand that you have bee colonies, or you just are aware of bees because you're a farmer?
Well, so growing up, my uncle, my grandfather had bees, and then we've had a couple of different neighbors that keep bees, the colonies on the farm, and use it as a staging ground for collecting honey. We have some fruit trees and some clover fields and so forth. And some years we'll plant buckwheat as a cover crop, which the pollinators obviously like really well. I have not been doing it myself in many years, but we have, like I say, neighbors that house them on our farm, place the hives.
Thank you. And I'm curious, are neonics new, relatively new, or have they been, as old as DDT, we just haven't paid attention to them? Like, when did they come into the industry?
So you're just gonna have to go by my not so good memory anymore. Probably at least 20 years.
Okay.
Within a few years, 20 years. It's been a number of years.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Anybody else?
No, that's really helpful.
Yeah, I think Senator Campion's got a good point that we probably want to hear back from you again, John, on this topic. But getting back to where we were about 20 minutes ago. And again, I think this has been very useful. To your knowledge, even though those studies were informal and you admitted as such, there are no PFAS substances in seed, correct?
That's my understanding. Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And again, please consider reappearing before us. And I'm sure Linda will be in touch with you again. And I hope your eyes are better than whatever you went to the eye doctor for.
Well, it's just they dilate them and
Yeah, I know. Yeah. And you're not supposed to drive right after that. I remember that.
Or testify, so we thank you for coming.
Yeah. Thank you, John. You're welcome to stay with us if you like.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we have been joined by our legal counsel, Michael O'Grady, and Michael, if you'd like to take the chair. We did hear testimony earlier today from Linda Waite Simpson, who is the Associate Director of the Vermont Veterinary Medical Association, who had, I guess, formally requested that we consider an exemption for dog collars and ear tags. And in fact, she wanted to enlarge it to include what she called veterinary products, which I think we probably want to define that pretty closely were we to get to that point. Her point was that if we ban dog collars and ear tags and whatever else we decide to include in that world, we risk ticks not being taken care of, animals getting Lyme disease, all the kinds of negative consequences thereof. But
she's speaking to neonicotinoids?
no, just PFAS. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
And she's saying that PFAS is intentionally added to dog collars.
I think.
But like the flea and tick, anti-flea and tick
Flea and
ones.
tick collars.
Yeah.
And the ear collars that are in cattle.
Yeah.
You would put on, and they generally do it as a repellent to flies and that stuff in cattle, because the flies in the, lead to a pink eye.
She said dog and cats like PFAS.
I don't recall.
I don't remember.
I
don't remember that part. But
Joe.
it specifically mentioned cattle ear tags, which, you know, this is my, most of those soft plastics
Mhm.
that you get
Mhm.
are usually done with some sort of insecticide.
Okay,
So that's one thing, and my point was, okay, even if we did that, would that not create sort of a line at the door of other people that might come in and say, hey, what about us? We should be exempt from this as well. But she was definitely speaking on behalf of this association in opposition to including this portion of products in the bill. In terms of banning PFAS, so. You know, I understand her concern, and I think if we did propose an exemption, we'd have to be pretty careful and put a fence around what exactly are veterinary products. I mean, I mentioned, you know, putting a little letter on a dog, or, and she said, well, that's not really a vet product, it's more of just a general merchandise product. So I don't know what vet products mean exactly, but.
She didn't say if there were many alternatives right now to
No,
like flea and tick collars without PFAS.
I don't think there are, and I think she did testify to that. That it's awful hard to find anything, even apart from vet products, that doesn't have PFAS.
Yeah.
So I don't know where that leaves us, Michael, but
well. Just using neonics as a corollary, you have exempted from the current neonic ban. Dog, flea and pet collars. I'm trying to find that specific language. It wouldn't be difficult to do that. You would probably just add another subsection that says 1114 does not apply to the sale of and whatever you want it to not apply to. Would that encourage other people to come in? Maybe. It's a possibility.
yeah, I don't think Linda appeared before Senate Health and Welfare. So this would come as maybe a bit of a surprise to the chair there, but I don't know how the rest of the committee feels. I'm sympathetic to it. I think, and this is all a balancing act, let's be honest, whether if we don't do it, we'll have more animals potentially, you know, being infected with Lyme disease, because I don't know that there's an alternative, Brian. I don't. Can you buy a dog collar, you know, flea collar without PFAS? I don't know.
Yeah.
So the language in the neonic exemption is pet care products used for preventing, destroying, repelling, or mitigating fleas, mites, ticks, heartworms, or other insects or organisms. It sounds like you don't just want pet care.
You know, I think you'd want it in cattle. The problem is in cattle that
It applies.
it's the flies in the summer, and the only alternative for that, particularly if what you're trying to do is avoid pink eye in cattle, is penicillin shots once they get it, which is not a good deal either, because we don't want antibiotics in animals because they're building up resistance, and it's a whole nother issue.
Of course, we haven't heard from anyone that wants cattle included, but
Well, but that, she said,
yeah.
the ear tags in cattle,
Right.
and immediately what goes to my mind is we use ear tags in cattle, and we use it, and they, not one, to number them, but two, they have insecticides in the ear tags. And that's what it's
Yeah.
for, so that was immediately what my mind went to.
So it looked at one point, at least to me, that section 6 and 7 were probably gonna be acceptable. If send it back to the Health and Welfare Committee with our agreement, if you will, but this opens the door, to me at least, but obviously Senator Starr's gonna have to weigh in on it too.
So you could define veterinary care products, something, I'm looking at a couple of different definitions. World Health Organization, a couple others. World Organization of Animal Health, as products that are prescribed by a veterinarian or that are sold and marketed for the purposes of and control of pests, et cetera, et cetera. And then you would exempt that from the requirements of what's here in section 7, 11, 14.
For all animals.
Will you be exempting the veterinary care products? Yes.
So do ear tags have to get ordered by a vet?
No, but they would be sold or marketed.
Okay,
For the
so that's the other
purposes
side.
of-
so you think it's a wide enough net that we could put around this that,
I think you basically already did with the neonics, it was more limited, more narrow, it was just pet care, but you could come up with something very similar.
Yeah, if I were a parent, I would be concerned about dogs, cats coming in, giving the kids, transmitting Lyme. I don't know if there's another way to deal with this than actually what we're talking about, but maybe. I mean, Lyme seems so prevalent now,
Yeah.
especially in young kids and like, geez, so. The PFAS, it's put on there mostly to keep water off of the collar.
That's
It's-
where we can get a tractor.
It has different uses, sometimes it's put in the product for kind of, the flexibility of it. It helps with that, it does provide some sort of slickness or sheen as well.
And they're plastic.
But I think that's a secondary trait.
That's what you're
So
looking
there are a couple,
And do you wanna-
there are.
And you
Thousands
try to
of them,
control
so they're
flies because
used
the
for
animals
different
have eye problems.
well, that's just true, all too often in this building. It's a little more complicated than it seems.
Yeah, because
I mean, if the truth of the matter is that everybody is getting,
Tractor Supply.
maybe not infected is the right word, but exposed to PFAS every day with a whole bunch of other fluorinated plastic products.
It's designed.
I don't know that this
Space wise.
adds anything.
What is this? This is these are the ear.
You know,
Well,
she's
to the
well,
negative,
yeah.
I do think that EPA has
Flies on cattle.
EPA has identified that the way to reduce PFAS exposure is to get it out of the products that are sold to the public. You are correct, it's already in the environment, there is already exposure, but the solution is to stop its continued supply into the environment. And this is a prohibition on products with that and or limitations on the sale of those products. So it is consistent with the EPA strategy for elimination of PFAS.
It's
Correct.
because like, I'm just going through what Tractor Supply's got. These are the ear tags and they're all plastic. I have no idea if there's a different level of PFAS or anything in this.
Well, I mean, there are some ear tags that are just ID tags, right? And so.
No, I get that, but these are all the insecticide
Right.
ones for horn flies and
Right,
facial
right.
flies and all of that. Is there a way to ask the ag agency to take a look at this and see if there's alternatives?
I mean, you could ask that. You could also say that what would be exempt are those that are registered with the state or EPA for the purpose of of pest, you know, they're,
They're all referred to as insecticide,
right,
tags and, and what I just go through here and there's like, you know, 10 or a dozen or more of these. And I look at it and I don't know if they all have the same level of PFAS or whatever.
right.
I have no way to judge, but these are all on the shelf in stores like Tractor Supply. I can go right on the Barry Montpelier Road, get it. If I had somebody, I don't know if they were registered or something. Is there some better than others?
Yeah.
And I don't know how to judge that.
Well, I can talk to the agency about that, a way to refine the definition for what would be exempt, or to be comprehensive enough as well.
Right, cause once you know, like, if you've got beef cattle out in the field, you put them in the spring. I can't catch my cattle individually in the summer, I mean, you'd have to have it's just almost impossible.
They've got to be hungry enough to come back to the barn.
Well, or I can lure them in with salt and grain into a pen and then, but then you've gotta get hold of them, or, you know, and so people for years put tags in the ear to help with. And you know, and even that isn't enough, but it's part of a whole process that you do. But there are a dozen products just at one store. So my question is, how do I know if one's better than the other, or and is there somebody that in the agency could look at this and help us?
Well, the agency currently has authority to ask for the formula for any pesticide product, basically the ingredient, of any pesticide product. Could they ask or be directed to ask for the formula for any of those types of products? I mean, and what would that do more than just exempting them? I mean, if they don't have it in there, they won't be subject to this anymore. If they do have it in there, you're making a policy decision that they need to be exempted because they need to be available for.
Right, well, at this point, I don't even know, when I look at these tags, if they all have PFAS or there's some set of category that doesn't, and I don't know what I just know that for me to say I wanna ban them all just like that, would be really hard to do.
Okay. So I think I have enough information to go talk to the agency. Might ultimately want to come back to you and talk about some, you know, decision points for you all. You know, is it just the veterinary care products that are worn by the animal or worn, you know, attached to the animal? Is it all veterinary care products? I mean, I think there may be some decision points for you to make. But I don't know what they all are right now, but I want to talk to the agency.
And I just noticed the effective date for these two sections is January 25, which is a little bit further out. I don't know whether that gives us enough time to, you know, just like with the neonic discussion, to me, there has to be an alternative before you say, starting at 11:30 today, you can't do this anymore and you don't have any place else to go. To me, that doesn't make any sense at all. There has to be a thoughtful process to roll this out, sort of. And so I think that is important consideration, January 25. But I would appreciate, Michael, if you did talk to the agency to find out what alternatives people have. That'd be great. And are we the only state, or as we like to think of, the first state to do this, or
Maine has been with everything.
they already have?
Yeah, but it has a significant scheduled phase in.
which makes sense to me.
You know,
Senator, I'm good with that.
yeah, sorry.
That's okay. Michael, I'm curious about labeling, because, you know, if I'm gonna buy beans in a can with BPA or not BPA, I can now do that. I can see that on the label. Is there a labeling feature to this, or could we add it where people at least could find, is there PFAS in the collar or not, or in the ear tag, or is there neonic in the ear tag, that the consumer can make a decision if all the rest of this stuff doesn't pan out?
I think if it's subject to this as it's written, it's going to be largely banned, correct?
Yeah.
And then if it's allowed to have PFAS in it, because it's underneath the 20 parts per trillion or some other reason, you could say that the manufacturer is required to label it. That's a, I
Is that
had,
reasonable, like legally and all that?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, you have done that for other consumer products such as and other chemicals like BPA. I wouldn't see why you couldn't do it here as well. As now. There's one little kind of, if it's in something that is a pesticide label. The label is what EPA issues. You're not supposed to deviate from the label. That's the one for preemption clause. I will have to think about how to do that. I think about it.
The question I had way back when, I just remembered it when you mentioned that, was the 20 parts per trillion. And I think at one point we were gonna try to figure out where that came from. Is that an EPA standard, or why is that 20 and not 30 or 50 or 100? I don't
I
understand.
believe that was in the main ban.
Okay. And does that benchmark resonate in some manner with what the EPA, in other words, are they saying the same thing, that under that, yeah, you could do whatever you want, over that, oh no, we gotta take a look at that, or where did Maine come up with the 20 parts per trillion? You don't need to answer that now, I'm just kind of curious. Because I don't know whether that dog collar, the flea collar in a dog, if that's under 20, then we're already gonna probably exempt it, because it's not part of the bill.
Are you looking at that?
Yeah, I think that. Did you have anything else for us today, Michael?
Not right now, no.
We did hear from John, who was from Seedway, and his stance on the, let me see if I can say this, perfluoroalkyl and polyfluoroalkyl substances, better known as PFAS, that they don't exist in seed, at least from some sort of preliminary surveys they've done. So I think that's okay to leave that there. But then Linda Wade Simpson did make a pretty good point, I think, about the dog collars and flea collars and ear tags and whatnot, so. We're not obviously ready to just send this back to health and welfare with the stamp of approval, and I think we need to take some more testimony. I think it is important that we think this through too. As we are seeing with another act that was passed recently, there were some unintended consequences.
So the 20 parts per trillion is actually from EPA.
Okay. And would it be fair to say that?
They have a range 20 to 50,
Okay.
but if you're gonna have a trigger, which this is probably been on the low end, which makes it that's why I came with this one.
Small.
it seems like, I don't know whether it's true, that Vermont often adopts a more stringent guideline than EPA does.
Going back and forth, I think, with PFAS, hasn't it? It's true, agree, didn't we have it really stringent and they made it more strict? It was like this.
Yes, yes, so Vermont was one of the first states to enter the regulatory scheme for PFAS. And at that time, it was one of the more protective standards, but since then, EPA's proposed standards are going. They haven't been finalized yet. When they're finalized, they will be much lower than Vermont's current standards.
Do you know when they would finalize those? Any ideas?
Yeah, they have to go to rulemaking
Okay.
on them, and then there's probably gonna be litigation challenging them. So it could be a couple of years.
Okay, wow, wow.
So they have a corresponding LCAR committee, the US Congress.
Mark McDonald's on it.
They have, there are requirements, there's the OMB requirement, there's the reduction in paperwork requirement, there's the Congressional Budget Office requirement. I mean, there's a bunch of hoops that they have to jump through.
So we can't wait for them, I guess is what
Good point.
the upshot of it is. I mean, we have no concrete way of knowing how quickly that can happen.
Did Google, there's some.
Okay.
So in the 21st for EPA was in a study that they did, they found that in 20 to 50 parts per trillion.
They sliced.
So
It's like.
And under that, and see, now I'm thinking about continued exposure. Even if a product only had 19 trillion parts per trillion, if you touch it or eat it or whatever every day, doesn't the cumulative effect have the same effect?
I mean, I assume so. I'm not a scientist, so.
Yeah.
I do think it could build up in your system from
I
that.
think that, isn't that part of what the problem is with all of these chemicals?
Oh, yeah,
We
no,
see them showing up in other things and building up the food chain.
right. So to me, establishing a trigger is almost non-consequential if you're gonna be exposed to it. If every day you have a plastic water bottle.
I internally, I think it's, you know.
Yeah. And you're getting exposed over and over and over again, what's the difference? If,
Then you go to the main standard. This, except for some exceptions, beginning in 2025, a manufacturer of a product for sale in the state that contains intentionally added PFAS shall submit all this information. And then
What does Maine have exemptions?
they have if you employ 25 or fewer people, you're not subject to it.
What
what
is that?
does that mean? Is it, yeah.
Your
So if I'm on the farm and I'm putting, ear tags in that have PFAS in it, and I've got
this is
two employees.
from intentionally adding the PFAS to your product. And then there are further exemptions for something that's exempt under federal law, certain types of packages, used products. And then beginning January 1, 2025, the person may not sell, offer for sale, distribute for sale in the state a product containing intentionally added PFAS if they have failed to provide the information required. And there are further exemptions. So that's Maine. And the criticism of Maine is that it's really broad. It's really broad. If anything.
When did they pass that? Do you know? Probably not under Governor Page.
2023.
And they're the only state?
They're the only one I'm aware of. I can look into it.
So there's 48 states that are still the Wild West. And potentially 2. that are-
Well, I mean, the thing about PFAS is that it's been regulated incrementally, like Vermont has banned it in firefighting foam,
I remember that.
certain kinds of food products,
AstroTurf.
and so there are many states that have done that. Maine, Minnesota, and Washington gave their state agencies broad authority to ban PFAS. 12 states have phased out some PFAS in food packaging, including Vermont. 8 have it phased out some PFAS in rugs, including Vermont. This doesn't list Vermont as eliminating PFAS in cosmetics, but you've definitely looked at that. 12,
Cosmetics,
yeah,
I thought she had done something with cosmetics.
I think that might have happened last year, and the site is just not up to date.
Yeah, I seem to remember it too.
That's wax.
Yeah.
I kind of look at, if I've got a basic product and somebody's producing something like the dog collars to keep ticks off your kids and off of you when they're coming in, given Lyme disease and everything there is out there, that's pretty basic. If I'm just doing cosmetics to look good every day, it's kind of like, why? Right, why don't you put that in there? Right,
Well, it
The sheen or something, right?
Yeah.
Gives it a
it
little.
reacts with water.
Right, so it's waterproof mascara or something, right? I mean, I can see how people would wanna do that.
yeah, but would you just to look?
I can't relate, but I'm just saying.
No,
People who use that kind of stuff, I don't know.
I mean, just to look good, I'm gonna put something that's gonna, you know,
Negatively.
if I'm gonna use a collar for PFAS to keep me from getting Lyme disease, that seems a lot different than.
I think so, but that's why I want it on the label, so if somebody who's
Right.
doing that understands that
Yeah,
they're putting PFAS on their face.
Well,
Right.
you know, but I'm pretty much, if there's a reasonable alternative to this,
Right.
why wouldn't we immediately move to that?
So the Senate is the one that banned PFAS in cosmetics and vegetable products, but does not yet pass the House. It is.
Yeah, I.
Stuck on a wall.
Yeah, I like that, I don't,
That's right. I think we should.
I haven't got any problem with that.
Yeah.
Well, it's just been probably not a priority, right? They're talking to people who are unhoused, so I
I
get
think,
it.
I think that honestly, I think the issue with this bill is. Doesn't it apply to turf fields?
Yes, it does.
Like the what?
One of last year's, AstroTurf. On
I'll
fields.
ask you to.
And I think there were people that were very concerned about that, high schools, et cetera.
Yep.
Just about turf fields, and that was turf field. That was,
That's
yeah,
weird.
it looked like that turf field prohibition would go into effect.
If we don't know
Last
it's
year.
there, it's okay.
But it's still in one of the House committees, probably.
It is, so I mean, if they're taking this up, they're gonna have to change the dates are all. Even essential items, 2023.
Anything else, committee?
Nope, we're not.
Thank you.
Michael, thank you so much for coming in and we gave you some more homework, but hopefully not too painful.
I haven't even thought about veterinary products. And
I had neither.
I was like, oh,
No, that's,
oh,
I'm glad we heard from Linda. Tomorrow, Vermont fairs and field days. And cannabis regulation. Okay.
What are you doing on cannabis?
I don't know, it's just on the agenda. There's no witnesses listed, but,
no, James.
oh, Pepper, there's James Pepper.
Okay, got it.